So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. We are the last keynote meeting of the year for the think tank. And we have an exceptional speaker today to wrap the year up for all of us. The GIMI think tank meets weekly, and it brings topics on three different themes. One is, what are the future trends that are going to basically change the world? Therefore, we can imagine the future, and then we can create that future. So knowing where the world is going allows us to be the best innovators. The second theme is innovation management. What are the best practices and emerging practices that are happening in innovation management? And this is where Ron is leading this whole agenda called Innovation 4.0, where we're putting together all the new frameworks, toolkits on how we can do innovation management better, faster, quicker, including digital transformation, including the globalization, including the networks that we are using now to do all kinds of sourcing and collaboration in new and different ways. And of course, simulation, prototyping, and other things that goes with that. And the third one is, of course, what is going on in different countries. Each country is driving their own way. So we learn about innovation in Japan, innovation in Korea, innovation in Peru, innovation in Mexico, and other places. So those are our three themes in our GIMI think tank. Today, we've got a fantastic speaker who's going to be able to cover at least 2 or 3 of the topics at one time. He is from Colombia, from Ecopetrol. Ecopetrol is the leading energy company of the country and a leader in general in the energy space. Energy is everything. 20% of our GDP of every country is spent usually on energy, and that energy is used then to transform fertilizer, pesticides, production of food, production of steel, cement, everything. So energy is the foundation, is the unit of our currency for doing things. And Ecopetrol is the leader in terms of creating that energy and making it available across its ecosystems. Inside there are trends happening in energy itself, the future of energy, and we are talking about transition. Energy transition is happening. And as this energy transition happens, and we move from oil and gas to wind, renewables, it's going to change everything, where no longer are you going to be the country who got lucky because you found oil or gas underneath your ground. Now, because you got wind or you got sunlight, you're also now an energy player. So energy players are going to change. Distribution of that energy is going to change. Storage of that energy is going to change, and all that. And behind that, of course, we got bigger trends of recycling, renewables, and waste and circular economy. All this are part of Agostinho's charter. And Agostinho, who's coming with us, is the Chief Innovation Officer of Ecopetrol. He is building centers of excellences around Colombia and globally. And we are really privileged to have a person who's in this leadership role, driving innovation that affects all of us. And so therefore, Agostinho, I welcome you to this meeting. You can add Agostinho a little thing. And he's going to be sharing some amazing things they're doing. And he's also going to be asking you to participate with him to help him build the ecosystem to actually drive the change. So with that, Agostinho, welcome. I've heard him speak. He's a fantastic speaker. And I believe he's from 2 different continents, from Europe as well as from Latin America, from Portugal, as well as lives in Colombia. So we're going to see amazing ideas of diverse thinking, and be ready. So Agostinho, I set the stage up. I hope that I've given you justice, and then you can introduce yourself further and tell us where you're going. So with that, thank you for being here.
Andrew, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm actually worried now after listening to you, because first thing they teach you in business school is keep expectations low. Anyway, I'm really privileged and honored to join you today. I'm sorry for the mishap and arriving late. I had issues with my work computer, security and cybersecurity issues. So so quick note on myself. I was born in Portugal. I actually grew up in the States, hence the weird neutral accent from America. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and Ithaca, New York, until I was 10, almost 10. And then I went back to Portugal. And I kind of repeated that cycle. Every 10, 12 years, I move either to a different city or a different country or continent, like Tinder said. I don't know why, it just happens. but it's been very fortunate because it allows you to learn and, from your mistakes and understand how people attack the same problems in a different manner, and that's part of what innovation is, right? I'm 44 now. I look millennium, but I'm not. I have two kids, one born in Portugal, one in Colombia. My wife is Colombian, and I've been living here for 12 years now. I've been very fortunate to have worked in different areas of science, technology, innovation. So I began as a researcher in health sciences, believe it or not. I have a PhD in biomedical sciences, postdoc in human genetics. And from there, for some reason, I went to entrepreneurship. I have a couple of companies back home in Portugal. Um, and and for that, for some reason, people thought I could do innovation management, and Hijinda knows that happens, but it doesn't mean you're really good at it. But once again, I was lucky because I worked in organizations that were starting off, and so there was a spectrum of space to build and learn. So I've been working in innovation management. I did that for research institutes. I've done that for public institutions, and now I've been for the past 3 years working in the energy sector. I worked in the largest energy transmission company here in Latin America, which is ISA. And once Ecopetrol bought ISA, with that acquisition, I kind of, there an opportunity open to lead innovation efforts at Ecopetrol at a corporate level. And it's the kind of things that happens that you usually can't say no to because it's the largest company here in Colombia and one of the largest energy conglomerates in Latin America. Not because it's big, but because of the impact you can create. And that's really what moves me. I deeply believe that knowledge, technology, and innovation are a driver for change. I understand that sometimes that change hasn't been for the better good in the past, but I think there's an opportunity now, as Hajina said, to really make a difference. And by the way, there's no alternative. We're reaching that breaking point where either we do something fast to impact the world we're in, and obviously the businesses we lead, or something bad is going to happen. It has been happening, right? So we need to do things differently. And I think that's where this group and everyone is connected has a role within innovation. And yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell. I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay, Tendra.
Yeah, of
You
course.
you you open your mic. I'm not sure if you had something
Yeah,
to
no,
add.
while you do that, I was just going to make a comment. One of the things about great innovation people is they have a lot of diversity in themselves. And whether it's diversity by being born in one continent, educated in the second continent, working in the third continent, married to a person in the fourth continent, and things like that. And those all create a lot of dots. And I have the same sort of background, Agostinho. I was born in Africa, in Zambia, with a British background in terms of education for high school, and then an American education all the way through, and then traveling to South America and the way you think is a little different. That helps. And then the diversity of being an entrepreneur is helpful and recognize very quickly entrepreneurship is not the same as entrepreneurship. And so we're going to ask you a lot of questions about that also, is what is the similarities and differences. And you got about 30 minutes to present and
Yep.
share. And if somewhere in there at some point I may jump in and ask a question. And meanwhile, the audience will be collecting questions also. And then we'll have a free for all for the last 20 minutes.
Absolutely. And I actually I prepared a quick deck of slides for those 30 minutes, and it is I call it a jar opener. Try to provoke questions, and I have a lot of questions myself. So I think that's it. That's the main goal of
And part of it
the
for the
webinar.
audience listening in, Agostino is looking for collaborators and partners because he's building an ecosystem around at least 5 specific themes that I'm aware of. Maybe there's more. And on those themes, it affects all of us. Just to be very clear, it affects all of us. And so listen intently, see how we can collaborate, whether you're from Norway, Geyer, trying to figure out how Norway will participate on the energy equation with Colombia, or whether you're from SABIC or Saudi Aramco, or whether you're from a plastics company like Braskem or whatever. It all connects together.
Yeah, and just a quick note before I start the deck of slides. You mentioned something that's really important. when you look at Ecopetrol, and I'll go a bit deeper into the strategy, just so you guys have an idea, we move a lot of the country's GDP. And that means we have a responsibility in terms of impact. It used to be more environmental social, and for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, there's been a declared interest and a lot of resources poured into science, technology, innovation. Just to give you a sense of the field, Colombia unfortunately only invests about 0.2% of GDP in research and development, which is low. And it's been that way for the last maybe 20 years that I've known the country. It's been increasing for innovation. There's a higher level for that. It's about 0.6%, which includes R&D, but still very low. Half of that is invested by Ecopetrol, just to give you a sense of the dimension and our responsibility and the way we really take this to heart, right? I mean, if we know if we make decisions that will impact and have an effect on the ecosystem, so it has to be in hand with different players. We can't do it alone, right? Okay, so now I'm going to share my slides. I know I have 30 minutes. Thanks, Ajendra. If there are hands and questions, let me know. I probably won't see them. Just give me a second. Like I mentioned, Ecopetrol has a very strong bet. See that within the context of its strategy to make sure that everything we do within a concept of what we call human energy tech has to drive sustainable energy solutions to make sure that we're actually creating impact. And like many oil and gas companies, we've decided for the last couple of years that we need to evolve. And that, evolving means transformation. Transformation very much linked to science, technology, and innovation. Now, the first thing I would like to talk about is what does Ecopetrol strategy look like, right? And today we've been diversifying in the last acquisition of ESA. Let me get a pointer here. Give me a second. Is associated to that. Today we have three main business segments. One is obviously the oil and gas sector, traditional business. Today it's over 80% of EBITDA. The second one is low emission solutions, and the margin contribution is almost close to zero in terms of EBITDA. And then there's transmission and roadways and telecommunication, which is what we did when we got into that business by acquiring ESA. And that today is about 17, 18%. Now, why am I saying this? Because when you look at the strategy at 2040, which we call energy that transforms, we want to change that equation, right? And we want maximum 60% of the business in oil and gas. We know that will keep being important. It will stay important. But we want to increase at least 14% of the contribution low emission solutions, and the business that ESA has been leading, we want to grow that. So the first picture here and message is Ecopetrol is placing a big bet on growing in businesses we haven't been in the past. And that means a lot to science, technology, innovation. So that's the first message. The second message is the whole pie of the business, Ecopetrol wants to double it. So from now in 18 years time, we want to be double the size in terms of company and generation of value. What does that mean? Well, basically it means doing in 18 years what we've done in 74. Now, once again, second message, that growth rate and getting to that goals means investing a lot in science, technology, innovation, and making sure that that is a key trigger for value generation. And the third message is we are very ubiquitous in the Americas, from North America to Chile. There's a lot of presence in the different business lines and segments, and we are conscious that means we have not just a relevant position in Colombia and the responsibility there, but now in Latin America, and obviously the interaction with different ecosystems in the world. So global is something we carry very much close to the heart, and it represents an important piece of the strategy, not just for Ecopetrol at a very high level in terms of executive decisions, but also for science, technology, innovation. Now the question is, how do you make that happen? And there are a couple of examples here of the goals we do have to make sure we're on the right track. But more importantly, there are a couple of strategic pillars that I want to talk about quickly that really represents that focus of the strategy at 2040, which is, like I said, we are energy that transform. We really want to make sure that the impact we're creating works within the concept of those goals I mentioned. So to make that happen, bringing that down from 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet, there are four important pillars that we've defined within the strategy. Number one is we need to grow, but we need to grow with the energy transition. Now, like I said, that means that 30 to 50% of the share of our business has to be related to low emission businesses. Now, this is important. Once again, it means growing in things we haven't been doing up until now. The second message or pillar, sorry, is associated to TSG, and that basically means anything we do to generate value has to take into account what we call sustainability, which is technology in the heart of sustainability. What does that mean? Well, it means focusing on get to zero carbon emissions. By 2050, want to be zero carbon emissions in scope 1 and 2, and at least 50% at 2050 to cut back on total emissions, which this is an important tool, and it's part of our strategy. And we want to grow with that and generate value. But there's also water neutrality, which is so important, not just for Ecopetrol, but any high asset-based industry. And there's the impact on the creation of non-oil and gas jobs. And Hendrik mentioned this a lot. If you don't create and generate value in different areas in which you are, you're really not growing with the energy transition. So you really need to put your money where your mouth is. Now, the third pillar is what we call cutting edge knowledge. And this is where science, technology, innovation kicks in. To give you a quick idea, we want to contribute with science, technology, innovation, a cumulative EBITDA of close to $30 billion at 2040. So I was mentioning the four pillars, growing with energy transition. That growth has to be through the generation of value through the TSG. And then there's cutting edge knowledge. This is everything that has to do with science, technology, innovation, from reskilling and skilling of our own talent to make sure you have the right capabilities in place. But it's also putting a strong bet on how science, technology, innovation really creates value. So we're placing a bet that 10% of EBITDA of the cumulative value at 2040 comes from science, technology, innovation. That's around $30 billion. Now that's not a small number. I was mentioning that, right? It's understanding that we need to change the way we've been doing things. Just to give you a quick sense of the way we've been focusing on this. Last year was the best year we had. In terms of value generation, we've generated close to $400 million enabled by technology innovation. This year, unofficial numbers will probably be growing at least 40% that, so it'll be close to 600. But if you do the math quickly, napkin numbers, basically it means we have to generate $1 billion a year. Now that's a big change, and you could do that by internal growth in terms of capabilities, or you can work with the ecosystem around the world. And that's obviously the way we want to do it. And the example I have here today is to show you a way we're trying to build around that. And obviously the fourth one is we need to generate competitive returns. We deliver a lot of value in terms of transfer payments to the nation. So that means this growth strategy has to be sustained on a debt ratio over EBITDA that allows the return on capital, because part of the GDP, like I said, depends on what we do. So when you look at this, strong bet of growth in things we've not been doing, and science, technology, innovation is a cornerstone for that, right? So there's a big bet in it, and the cards are set to really create value in a different way. Now the question is, how does that look like when you start diving into specific goals of the business segments I showed you? So low emission solutions, for example, just to give you an idea, I've mentioned the 30-50% contribution we want to reach. This means you have to increase your production share in gas, but there's also energy efficiency and growing in hydrogen. Today, we're probably only 10% of the 1 million ton a year production that we want. So how do you grow that? And then who's going to use the hydrogen? How do you create the demand? right? And then there's renewable fuels and e-fuels, and there's natural climate solution, which we want to make sure that we have through opportunities of decarbonizing our own business, but also what do you do with the carbon? For example, here in Colombia, all the soda drinks are made with the carbon we capture. But that market is, is tapped. So what are you going to do when you have 2 to 4 million tons a year? What are you going to do with that carbon? So that's the type of questions and big projects. That means creating new solutions, a new value chain, the right talent, right? It's same for hydrogen. So there's a lot of opportunities with that. And the question is, if you want transformation, you want that to be based on the energy sector, which has such an important toll, like Chandra said, you need to start with a question. And we started as well, what if we would do this differently? Because Ecopetrol, to be honest, in the past, we did it more internally because of different reasons. Most of you know why, right? There's intellectual property, and we have enough resources and people, and we believe we can do it alone. But then we started changing the question: what if we were doing this with the ecosystem? Would we be creating more value? Would that be easier to drive not just research and technological development, but really what we called impact innovation, and not just the logic of impact innovation in terms of environment and social and economic development. We believe impact innovation is impact in our business, impact in the context of where we work and the world. And cutting edge knowledge means understanding the role that research has, the role that technology development has. But if you don't have a drive for innovation, none of that will reach the market, either internally within our business or in the ecosystems. So that is very important if you really want to create value through innovation and orchestration to make sure it impacts some level of sustainability for the regions, right? And the challenges, insights, just to give you a quick idea, when we started working with this, obviously, and some of you have worked in these type of organizations understand this pretty well. First, you need to understand your purpose, and we did that within the strategy. But then there are things like culture and talent, right? What is the right culture to execute this? How do you change the way talent is developed? Making sure you build on what exists, because you're not going to, change your talent profile just because of that. You need to reskill. There's also decision making at corporate governments. How do you make sure it's a priority for your agenda? And then there are things like capabilities, right? What are the right capabilities that we should have, and associate that to some challenges, as you might imagine. For example, appropriation is one of them. When you get to scale, one thing is a pilot, but when you want to convince someone to change the way they do things, and the risk awareness changes within the industrial process, that's a different business. And then there are other issues that seem simple, but they're not. Because when I say we registered $400 million in terms of benefits, a BTA in 2021, that was certified. So we have accountants with the business leaders and ourselves saying, okay, we developed these projects, we implemented these technologies, these innovations, and we certify that. So there's a credibility within the corporate governance level that adds value to the purpose, and obviously moves a different type of culture, right? And in the end, I think there's one of the biggest insights, and that's the rest of the presentation, is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to connect the dots, and that means collaborating with the best people and the right talent anywhere in the world. There's no reason why from Colombia, from Ecopetrol, we shouldn't be working with any type of talent, as long as we're adding value in a win-win situation. And I'll go through this pretty quickly. That means evolving from being separate in terms of the model, having divided portfolio, repeated projects, issues related to capital allocation through budget and not specifically for science, technology, innovation, even at the measurement level and knowledge development level. It shifts from that to, we don't want the intellectual property, because to give you a sense, we're the largest producing, by far, largest producing organization in terms of patents. We're up to 130. Doesn't sound much, but for Colombia, that's a lot. but don't ask me how much money we're making from that or how much value, right? So there's an interesting issue to that of changing the way you look at knowledge and intellectual property to an ecosystem orchestration, and how you measure that in terms of value contribution, and that impacts the way you make sure there's capital allocation that allows you to deploy resources according to risk, but according to possible benefits, right? Now, the first thing, like I said, that was important was purpose, but the second was focus, right? And having a consolidated portfolio. So we define what we call clusters that give us that focus. So we have a cluster for resilient assets, make sure our business keeps growing and that there's security and that we go through economic shifts without losing value. The second is the carbonization of our business and opportunities associated to that. Like I mentioned, energy transition, of course. There's Industrial Revolution 5.0, anything that has to do with digital opportunities. And then there's circular economy and TSG. These six clusters give us focus associated to the purpose and pushes not what we wanted to do is to push knowledge frontiers to accelerate the energy transition and really create value. Now, there's a clear vision associated to these clusters that, I mean, when you start looking, and this is a very simple graph, just to exemplify, Ecopetrol has done a lot of work in research and development, like I mentioned. Where I think we need to really push the barriers is in innovation. And the way we do it in Ecopetrol, we work a lot with TRLs, technology readiness levels. And we do a lot of work for universities and research centers, but that goes up to a certain point. The question is, how do you go from TRL 6 or 7 when you have a prototype and you want to, put it up at a full scale to operate at industrial level, and create new opportunities and new businesses associated to these different clusters, right? And so the answer to that was we should be working with a network of innovation centers, which actually don't exist exactly with these focuses, right? With these clusters. So the answer to complementing the innovation capability was let's create these centers of excellence for innovation, very much focused on innovation, to really push that barrier and allow us to create more value at a greater speed and do that with the ecosystem at a win-win scenario, like I said. And so that's where this concept of what we call an innovation orchestration network, and we're calling it EcoNova. EcoNova is the representation of everything you do in terms of strategy for science, technology, innovation. And for that to happen, you need a network. And that network can't be ours. We want to impulse it, we want to develop it, but if you want to focus on changing the way the energy sector can create value through innovation with sustainability, it has to be through orchestration, right? And that's why we're creating this concept. And the concept is, like Indra said, pretty simple and on paper. And it depends on understanding. Then here in blue, this darker blue here, are the centers we've been working on. So we'll have one for energy transition. We'll have another more focused on the energy transmission with ESA. Industrial Revolution 5.0. We'll also have one associated to TSG, circular economy, biodiversity, decarbonization. So you see each center has a focus more associated to the cluster. But the beauty about this is that someone who will be working in Caribe on energy transition, if they want to work on sustainability, they just connect with the center in Meta, which is a region here in Colombia that has one of the most biodiverse region and water associated technologies and business related opportunities probably in the planet. So the beauty about this is building around those capabilities in terms of technology and research that I said, centers that are focused on those clusters, but that are very important. And if you look at them, it's not just for Ecopetrol or Colombia. These are things that a lot of different organizations are putting their money and the bet on trying to create value for them and for the countries and the regions they work in. And the other boxes you see here are a reflex of what the ecosystem is doing when they look at our strategy. The strategy of having centers of excellence focused on innovation on these topics. What has happened is other innovation centers, research centers, they're saying we want to be part of the network, and that's what we want. for the network to grow. We're putting in platform capabilities. We're putting in these centers that have technology infrastructure and specific focuses. But in the end, we want the network Econova to be an asset for everyone, right? That's the opportunity. And we want it to start global. And that's where we're tapping in to understand where should we have these centers in the world. And once again, it doesn't have to be our center. It could be a center that already exists in our part of the network. That's where you start building and creating value at a different level. The first one we've been looking to is Chile because of our interest there in terms of energy transmission and roadways. Um, but we're already looking into that question. Should we have one in the States, in Houston, or in Israel, or in, well, depends on the focus, depends on what we're trying to do. And these centers are all built around a model. And this is an example of what we're doing in Cartagena. Um, it is open for everyone. Hopefully, you can visit us someday. And basically, the model is based on having a dynamic articulation with the ecosystem. We start this off with companies, universities, the local government. We have an operator. We're not actually operating the centers, just so you know, because we know we don't. That's not what we're good at. So what we do is we impulse this and have an operator to to really drive the value to the centers. The common physical space is important. For example, in Cartagena, we have two buildings, 1,000 square meters each, and they'll have an environment for experimentation, which you know is important. So this in Cartagena will have an electrolyzer, um, somewhere where cars can really put hydrogen to work, uh, solar panels to make sure the hydrogen is green. We'll also have technology capabilities for prototyping in different areas of knowledge. And we'll have a strong capability in digital metaverse. Why? Because we want entrepreneurs, companies, SMEs to be able to connect to the other centers on a part in the world and negotiate and do joint projects. We don't want that to be local. Like I said, it has to be local and it has to be built on capabilities within the ecosystem. So the center in Cartagena and all the centers will have something like this. Some sort of technology that differentiates itself in the region, talent development programs that really um, moves that limit in terms of capabilities that we're trying to develop, accelerator, innovators, um, incubators, even fundraising for projects, science, technology, innovation, connection with investors, and there's always the prototyping labs, which are important. So all this, entrepreneurs, innovators can use for free. That's the goal, because we want to create that footprint. We want to create the sense that this is something that will add value to us and to the ecosystem. If you go to Cartagena, where it's at, for example, energy transition and hydrogen makes a lot of sense because it's a part of the country where you have a port, you have um, our own refinery, there's cement, there's agro industry. So it's a industrial value chain, which makes sense to have these capabilities. How does this in the end start moving the ecosystem? Just to give an example, we're now working with different players in Cartagena because they're now, when they look at this and they see the building ready and already up and running, and in January we have our first programs um, out the door. The players in Cartagena are saying, well, why don't we make this region, because we have the port and all the industry players, the point of entry for electrolyzers? You can assemble them there, right? So that creates new opportunities in terms of value chains that don't exist. But then the question is, where's the right talent? It doesn't exist. What about capabilities for entrepreneurs to use hydrogen? The joke we usually make is, you know, as an entrepreneur, you can't use hydrogen off a PowerPoint. You really need hydrogen, right? Or you can't test your business models and your technology. So just to give you a quick example of the center in Cartagena, and all these centers have to have this dynamic model to articulate and orchestrate the ecosystem, have to have the right players, universities, companies, governments, entrepreneurs, has to create impact locally in the communities, and has to have some sort of level of differentiation, competitive value in terms of programs and technology. And this is a quick example of what we're doing in Meta. Like I said, it's much associated to biodiversity, water, and circular economy. What do we usually do when we start working with the ecosystem locally is we tell them, look, this is what we want to do. And then the next question is when they look at the goals and what we try to do in terms of impact for our business and for Colombia, and obviously if you can scale this to other parts in the region and the world, fantastic. Then you start promoting that sustainable management and putting that at the service of these communities and the local ecosystem. And that's where things start moving faster because they understand we're putting a strong bet in terms of investment of resources, people, time, money, and we have very ambitious goals to fit that. So the message we're trying to tell these ecosystems in terms of science, technology, innovation is we're here to create value, and we know we can't create value for us if we don't impact the world we live in, and that can't be done alone. It has to be done through a strong ecosystem. And then I think I'm close to the 30 minutes already, and I'll end there so we can start the good part and talking and discussing about everything we've been showing.
I think, first of all, thank you, Agostinho. This is great as a framework and discussions. Look, just for the audience sake, somebody has to take a lead in the ecosystem play. Eco Patrol says we'll take the lead, right? So ecosystems don't form without a leader who acts like the adult in the room. Eco Patrol's playing the adult in the room, and it's inviting people to join them by also saying that we are providing some direction, strategic direction on the clusters and the themes to focus on. These are important for society, important for Eco Patrol, important for Colombia as a country, and they're selecting those themes also. So strategy to some extent is also being guided for the ecosystem to move in the same direction. Now the problem is, can you get the cats to play together? So there's lots of people and they all have their own agendas of what's in it for me. What's in it for me is the biggest issue over here. And Agostinho's biggest challenge is to make sure that there's something in it for everybody. And how do you make that happen? So Agostinho, what is the message you're sending to people about why this is a win-win? What is it that you're doing that allows you to agree with the alignment of the strategy and the direction, knowing that they'll be treated fairly in this ecosystem and not get left behind if they don't participate and things like that. So just as an idea, how are you driving the collaboration? We can hear it in your voice, we can hear it in your message, you're inviting, but that's not enough. What are the other things that you're doing that tells everybody, let's play together nicely and we're all going to win together nicely?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question, John. That it's different when you invite people to a party and then they ask, yeah, but what is at the party, right? What's happening? Well, the first thing I would say, this always kicks off with a lot of transparency and honesty. If it doesn't start from that, there's no way ecosystem building will work. And we've seen a lot of examples of that in the past at private level, public level, regional level, government level, etc. So that's number one. We are very transparent in terms of goals and ambition. And I think the strategy that Ecopetrol has, I believe, well, that's my opinion, I believe is very simple in terms of messages. I know there's a lot of background to that, but I believe that the message is very clear, where science, technology, innovation is a key component, and that we can't do it alone. And the transparency about it is the goals and the investment and the efforts we're putting into it. So that's number one. The second is, for example, for the centers of excellence, we don't kick them off saying, this is what we're going to do and these are our goals. We kick off saying, this is what we want to do in our goals. What are yours? And that is a different invitation. And we say, we want to build it together. We really want to build it together. So we did that with Cartagena with what we call anchor founders. Obviously, we can't do that with everyone because you can't move the first levers if everyone's playing in the same game, right? There's a certain rule to that in terms of building it. But it's happening everywhere. I was actually at a meeting this morning here in Medellin. We're working mostly in electric energy sector with ESA and a lot of different players, and it was the same. We're at the same table, so there's universities and centers, all the other centers, research centers and companies and clusters. And we're saying, look, this is what we want. Tell me what you want. And you start building from there. Right. And obviously there's a vision. We have our own stakeholders and shareholders to respect, but they've already signed off on a strategy which will depend on working with the ecosystem. That's not that's a very important and strong answer. And I say number three, Trender, would be that we're putting our money where our mouth is. Cartagena, we put a building, actually two buildings. We put another one in Bucaramanga. We put resources for technology. We're building capabilities that always are for us, but we want everyone to use it because we know in the end that's the way that you really create exponential value. If there's opportunity and win-win. But that, I would say those are the three things. Probably a fourth would be that we want to tap into opportunities. And when I say opportunity, not just for business development, it's tapping into talent anywhere in the world. And we want people from in organizations from anywhere in the world to understand that here in Colombia, there's a partner that is willing to build things differently.
Got it.
And hopefully that will deliver.
So for the audience, look, innovation management is hard within a business unit. It's even harder between a company. Now what Agostinho and EcoPetrol are trying to do is say, all of you, let's play together, but they don't have a governance on top of each other, like within a company. And yet you got to somehow get people to collaborate and work together. So it's the hardest of all innovation plays. And if you are trying to get a PhD in innovation, this is the PhD of PhDs of innovation, managing ecosystems. Not easy, a big challenge, and multiple fronts on that front. So Agostinho, first of all, congratulations on the direction, the leadership, and everything else that you're doing. And I'm gonna ask Enrique, I think he's got a question for you to ask. Enrique, please.
Thank you. Hey, Agostinho, this is Enrique from Lima, Peru. It was a pity that we didn't meet you before. We were in Cartagena just a month ago, for our Innovation Latam. So we could hopefully, at that time visit your facilities. But well, we can do that another time. Actually, I noticed in your goals that I didn't see the time, but you were hoping to achieve 100% automatization. I don't remember the date, but we were discussing actually this topic before, and 100% automatization, the future of work on robotics and AI and artificial intelligence, and the impact in us, in people like us that we work, for a company like EcoPetrol. How are you going to manage this actually transition from the way we are today, or your company with X amount of people working in this area, for 100% automatization in the next, 10, 20 years?
Right. So the 100% optimization, there's not a lot of information there. The roadmap is very much associated to automizing the industry level processes, but obviously not everything in the company, but it's more associated to asset management and making sure that really creates value where it should. The goal is at 2030, so it's not far away, right? And we've already started. We've had 5G projects at refineries. We've had digital transformation, digitization, reskilling. There's a very strong bet. I would say, so just as in the sake of transparency and honesty, it's such a hard bet, but I think people are tired already of doing courses and understanding what it means to really, move that digital strategy. Right, but there's it's begun, and a large piece, maybe 50-60% of the value I mentioned we generated in 2021 is associated to digitalization. So it's not just investment, it's really creating the benefits that you register on value, and it goes into and the P&G at the end of the year, right? So, but what we do understand, and hence the center in Bogota will be very much focused on digital opportunities. That's actually an interesting example. The way we started Bogota was different than the way we started Cartagena. And why? Because Bogota is always a different ecosystem, different capabilities. There's a lot of developed competencies in digital strategies and technologies, etc. And our anchor founders in Bogota in the center are Microsoft, Accenture, Claro, Tigo, Lenovo. So these are big players, and they're going to put their bet is obviously being part of the Center for Excellence, because they know we will be putting our portfolio for needs of digital transformation at the service of the ecosystem. So in the case of Bogota, what we're doing is we're going to say this is our roadmap, and we're going to show it to the world.
I think we lost him.
No, I'm back.
Okay, good. All right,
Sorry.
let's put Agostinho back in. Enrique, I think your question is good. We are innovating, and we are going to see more and more automation, and therefore a lot less people may be needed for some of the things, and hopefully reskilling, retooling will allow humans to transform into other higher value roles, so that we remove the tedious and the boring out of our day life and let the machines do that. And hopefully, and we've seen this transformation happen again and again, and let's use innovation as a way to make sure that people have purpose and meaning as we do these transitions.
So, Hitendra, just a quick add on to what you're saying. And once again, we put our goals associated to that bet. If you look at the strategy, 70% reskilling at 2030 is a big bet, and that's associated to what Hitendra is saying. We know this will move and change people's roles, and we wanted to, raise that level to a higher level. And the other thing is, we have a very strong awareness of the need to create non-oil and gas jobs. So there's over 230,000 jobs we have projected, at least. Within that, it has to do with that as well, right? So we know that will have an impact. We want to have a positive impact.
Great,
but like I said, it's placing the opportunities in our own roadmap to the ecosystem and having the goals behind it to make sure that we're touching the different value drivers.
So, thanks, Enrique. Agostinho, a couple more questions. We've had a lot of experience with the LCD industry, the liquid crystal displays, the flat screen, big TVs getting bigger and bigger. And we were in Korea helping at that time. And the industry value chain is quite complex, from machine providers to people who make televisions to people who actually make the displays. And so there were a lot of players in the ecosystem. And every time you made the screen bigger, you had to make sure the suppliers were there to make the technology to make the screens bigger. The television guys were ready to do everything. So one of the requirements was to create an industry roadmap. And we saw the industry roadmap that Japan had put together through SETI, Semiconductor Industry Association. And all the players in Japan were marching together, lockstep, saying we'll go from one generation to the next generation to the next generation of size of displays. In the same way, you guys are you're driving a transition, which basically means that some people want to move slower to maximize whatever they're doing, their assets, and making sure they get the return on investment, while others might want to move faster to be able to catch the opportunity and be first in it. And therefore, everybody doesn't want to play and move at the same speed. And so in Korea, the government stepped in and says, we're going to help you create a roadmap that we can all watch and move from Gen 5 to Generation 6 to Generation 7 of whatever it is. And therefore, there was going to be a win-win. Is this some of the things that you have in plan, or are you going to leave it to luck and chance that people will move? Because somebody has to play the role of setting roadmaps and transitions, logical transitions, which allows companies to flourish versus going bankrupt or being disrupted. So just high-level question. Are you talking about that? Are you saying it is your role, or are you waiting for maybe somebody else to take that role? But somebody has to take the role of saying, let's move lockstep together through the transitions, and that way we can maximize our impact.
The answer is yes, absolutely. But in the sense that we understand it's not our role, it's our role to mobilize it and make sure that it happens, but it's with other players, right? So an example of that is the hydrogen roadmap here in Colombia. We participated deeply in that, invested a lot of time, resources, but we were not the only player. But we knew we had to be part of it to make sure that the conversations that were being made and the decisions within that roadmap, fitted what we believed was the right strategy. And once again, because I didn't mention this, I'm not sure if you know, Ecopetrol is 80% owned by Colombia, the Colombian government, which means we're owned by the Colombian people. And at the end of the day, right? So we need to participate in that. And those conversations are flourishing so much that we're now doing that conversation at an international level. So our vice president of low emission opportunities within business segment is now taking that roadmap with the government and other players, our own roadmap, and putting that on the map at a global scale, right? So these are the type of things that we know we need to work on. It's not easy, and it sometimes doesn't work at the speed as you would want. But that needs to be done specifically in sectors or areas of opportunity where there is no clear steering type of roadmap, right? Hydrogen was an example. I think CCUS and that type of opportunity will be another one. I think storage for Latin America needs that as well in terms of opportunity and energy storage. So there's a lot of different things that need to happen. And besides that, we have our own roadmaps for each cluster that are associated and linked to the business strategy. Now that seems obvious, but it's not. And to give you a sense, the vice president of science, technology, innovation has over 420 people, and we have a chief strategy officer within that vice presidency just for science, technology, innovation. And his role with his team is to make sure our roadmaps fit the company's roadmaps, and he's at the table at that conversations at bilateral, unilateral, and multilateral meetings.
Agostinho, this is great. I just want to share the story. In Korea, what they did was they saw the roadmap for the country of Japan, because Japan was the player in LCDs, and Korea basically created their own roadmaps, and then they compressed the roadmaps to make sure they hit every target almost like a year earlier. And as a result, Korea then took over the world in terms of LCD industries by moving the industry. So it was one ecosystem fighting with another ecosystem. And that was the war. The war was between ecosystems. The war was not between companies. And so it's very exciting what you guys are doing, but just want to share that story. I'm going to let Geir ask a question. And as he gets ready to ask a question, I want to plant the seed right now that as you build innovation centers and everything else, GIMI's objective is to create common language, common framework across organizations and between companies so they can talk about innovation in the same way. Common language, common framework, common concepts, common processes. And as a result, thousands of companies can interact with each other very well. And individuals and teams can work very well. And we call that the operating system. We need an operating system for innovation, which is called a common language, common framework. PowerPoint is a common framework. Microsoft Office is a common framework. What is the common framework that you are thinking about as you build your ecosystem to increase the speed of communication, the speed of collaboration, the speed of idea generation, the speed of team formation, the speed at which assets are put together, the speed at which results are collected. All of that, our hypothesis at GIMI is common language, common framework, common processes accelerates everything. And you don't have to answer that right now. I'm going to let Geir ask his question, and then hopefully you can wrap it up with that last piece, because I think it's a very important piece of how 5 innovation centers can work well together. And then all the ecosystem around the innovation centers, how will they work well together also? Geir, you have the question. I've planted my question, so Agostinho doesn't feel he's got time to think about it.
Yeah, hello, and thank you for the presentation, Agostinho. It was really interesting. I was really
Geir, introduce yourself and where you're from. It will be helpful for people to know where you're from.
Yeah, I'm from Norway, as you can maybe guess. And also I'm working within a consultancy company called Miles in Norway. So my question is, how much dialogue have you had with the big players in Norway? We have the government partly owned oil company Equinor, with quite a lot of large programs on the. Also, a lot of it is in PowerPoint, of course, but they are mainly focusing now on capturing of organization stuff, but also involved in hydrogen. And the reason for Norway's interest in hydrogen is shipping, of course. And those are the two major areas where Norway's company like Equinor is going at for the moment, as far as I can see. They, of course, also are looking into every other aspect as anyone is, because it seems like nobody really knows what's going to come out of it and what will be the commodity in some years. So they are looking in all kind of directions. But my question is, have you already established contact with companies like Equinor in Norway?
So within the scope of science, technology, innovation, the answer is no, not directly, but I know the business segments at different levels, especially executive levels, have been in conversations to explore value sharing, knowledge transfer, and other type of opportunities. So I know that's been happening, and specifically, not with that company, but I know within. So this is how it works in Ecopetrol. The hydrogen roadmap, the owner of that, the product owner of that, is the Vice Presidency of Low Emissions. What we do in science, technology, innovation, we're kind of like a capstone beneath that to make sure we enable that and speed up and accelerate. And you anticipate the goals. When they say we want to do it at 2035, we say, okay, we think we can do it at 2030 if we do A, B, and C in terms of science, technology, innovation, and we get to an accord. So within that roadmap, I know they've been talking to different organizations, especially in terms of maritime opportunities. That's something we want to explore, obviously, for the Caribbean Sea. So I know they've been talking, and we've been studying different types of nodes that exist in Europe in the maritime spectrum. So there's Scotland, Norway. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. But the quick answer, sorry, I know that they've been talking. I haven't personally, in science, technology, we haven't, but I love to. I think that's part of the opportunity and the scale we want to see what opportunities are out there.
Yeah, and I also know that the Ministry of Climate in Norway is extremely involved in a lot of programs and also funding stuff. So, and Hidendra Patel don't know that, but I normally see the Minister of Environmental in Norway once a year, maybe. So I would be able to reach out when there is a need for it from the Norwegian perspective. They are all looking for what to do and how to do and who's doing what, and is there something of value for us there? Yeah. So I think the interest is very high.
Okay, that's amazing. I think that's what we're trying to do with the network, right? And Econova. Yeah. Just to give you an example, the way we look at Cartagena, which is probably more advanced center in terms of technology development and infrastructure at this moment, we want people and organizations in the world to see that this could be and starting to answer your question, a very important platform for piloting and scaling. That's what we want. We want them to see, okay, this is a great place where you can deploy technologies, put your talent, scale your startups, and the network is a platform for that. And I think it's an interesting platform because we're touching different scopes and areas of knowledge that are part of a strategy that, by the way, fits a lot of different big organizations in the energy sector and even governments, right? And when you look at the challenges associated to digitalization and energy storage and energy transmission and energy transition itself, decarbonization and highly heavy industrial processes, right? Things have to change, water usage, all that is, I think that's not a secret for anyone. And we want this to be a platform. Just to give another example, this is so much true that we're trying to discuss with players like Boston Dynamics. And we're saying, look, not just as a company, which is interesting for their own business cases to prove robotic implementation at industrial level, but also a platform because you can deploy your technology, you can help us develop the right talent and use this network, to accelerate and push barriers we probably didn't know were there, right? And opportunities. So it goes back to the question you were asking. We believe this to be a platform. We need a common language, obviously, and the structure, but we also want to make sure that the goals each organization or participant have the opportunity to face them and reach them. Because if that's not true, then there's no win-win, right? And so government has their own goals. We do too. Entrepreneurs, innovators, GIMI, right? There's a lot of and there's space for that competition at a healthy level. But definitely a platform, definitely common language. And just to give an example, we're developing with Microsoft and different players a science technology innovation platform where we want all the centers to be, but we also want everything we do in science, technology, and innovation to be available. So a change in strategy there is, like I said, instead of having the patents, locked away and you can consult the patents, right? But why not have open IP strategy? I mean, not for everything, but it's very different when you place these patents and you say to the world, look, there's a platform, which is a network of centers. Here are some patents associated to, let's say, water usage and efficiency in industrial processes. What are yours in the world? Let's put them together as a pool and develop a program that some expert like GIMI or someone else could develop. And what can you do to create new technology-based opportunities for new products and markets? That's where you change. I think, at least in theory, you should change the output, right, in terms of speed.
Yeah. Geyer, thank you for your question, and please connect as much as you can. Agostinho already put his email on the chat, and so for those of you not paying attention, please connect together. Let me try and wrap up now because we are going past the hour that we're supposed to. So Agostinho, first, the GIMI network has got people from Saudi Aramco, people from Petrobras, people from PDVSA, people in Indonesia, people from all around the world. And they're probably thinking about how do they connect and should they connect and how they should connect. What I wanted to share with everybody on the GIMI network is, here is EcoPatrol actually saying, look, come collaborate with us, come join us. And so it's a fantastic thing. But there are a couple of things for all of us to learn from. The first one is the competition for change, transformation, and winning in the future has gone from you as a small company or a bigger company even trying to win versus the ecosystem. This has become an ecosystem play now. And managing ecosystem is going to be the next hardest thing inside there. And included in there is no longer maybe the innovation management tools of last year. It's got to be innovation management 4.0. And in here, you already heard Agostinho talk about open IP, open platforms, inviting your supply chain, inviting other people to collaborate, test out business models on their places. These are all part of innovation 4.0, simulation, testing, and building trust quickly. So we are moving into a new world. So here's what I want you to imagine. Whether you play this game or not, it's not what if, it's going to be what's next. Imagine this world of energy that is truly zero carbon, right? Which is truly renewable, recyclable, and everything else, which is truly has got automation and comfort, which is truly that the environment gets better as a result of using these energies. It is truly a set of players which are going to be there. And whether you are going to play in this or not is your choice. But what EcoPatrol and others are saying is there is a different world coming very soon. Join us and collaborate with us. And in there, if you participate, you will learn a lot about the latest and newest technologies, and you will learn the latest and everything else about innovation management. and there's an open invitation from that. So first of all, I'm really grateful, Agostinho, for coming here and sharing this with us. And I want to give you the last line or last sentence, your last call for sentence, your appeal, your help, or whatever it is, but you have the last word.
Thank you, Nathan. No, just so there are two questions here in the chat. I'll answer them quickly. First is collaboration Middle East, absolutely. With anyone in a country in the world, just find the right scope and start from there, right? So that's just so you know. And the second, in terms of biofuels, hydrogen-powered aircraft, we've been looking into e-fuels and that possibility. It's in the roadmap. It's further down the roadmap. We first need to focus on hydrogen for our own business, and then in terms of second horizon, the opportunities arriving from there. So it's on the roadmap, but I'd say further down the road, just so you know. And just to end off, so once again, thanks for having me. The goal of talking to you today is, you know, my own pitch of collaboration and transparency and common goals is part of what we're trying to do. We can't do this alone, and we don't want to do it alone. It doesn't make sense. So open doors, please reach out. I send you my email. We can further talk on opportunities, from joint programs to joint projects to just, you know, being part of the network. There are different opportunities, different levels. By all means, reach out. And once again, Junden and everyone at GIMI, thanks for the opportunity. This is the type of discussion and conversation we love having, because it really exposes us and makes us learn faster. And that's part of it's part of the story as well. So thank you again for having me, and happy holidays for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Agostinho. Open invitation to EcoPatrol and the ecosystem they're building. Connect ecosystems to ecosystems. That's going to be the next big game. But first, let's build the ecosystem and make that ecosystem powerful so that you can do bigger, bolder, better things faster and cheaper. So that's the philosophy. So again, everybody, happy holidays. Have a great time with your family, your friends. And remember, our philosophy at GIMI is our mission and vision will not change. We want to get 1 million people certified within the next 5 years. 1 million people certified to create a common language, a common framework on innovation. We want thousands of organizations, corporations certified so that they have a common language and a common framework. And if we can all work together, we can take on any of the biggest challenges on the planet and actually solve them. And therefore, as I say, happy holidays to everybody into a 2023 year. Remember, together we can, and together we will. Thank you.